Okay, let's just jump right in. Welcome to today's deep dive.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Today we're tackling high-end AV distribution, specifically looking at the Zenty ZT-119.
Right, the 8x16 HDMI Matrix Extender.
Exactly. And look, if you are just trying to plug a single Roku into your living room TV, this is definitely overkill for you.
Oh, absolutely. Way too much hardware.
But if you're trying to wire up a sports bar or a lecture hall or even a massive smart home, this is the kind of gear that keeps the signal alive.
Yeah, this is for when your basic plug-and-play stops working because a video cable needs to run, 50 feet through a ceiling.
Or clear across a warehouse.
Right. The mission here is really solving the cabling chaos problem. How do you route 8 different high-bandwidth 4K sources to multiple screens without signal loss?
And without bankruptcy-inducing HDMI cabling costs.
Yeah, that's the big one. I mean, nobody wants to buy 50 feet of active HDMI.
So let's look at the architecture first, because the model number, the 8x16 part, is slightly misleading.
Or at least requires an asterisk.
Right, because a standard matrix is usually symmetrical. 8 inputs to 8 outputs. How are they getting 16 outputs here?
Well, it's a hybrid design. You have your 8 HDMI inputs for your sources, like cable boxes or media servers.
PCs, that sort of thing.
Exactly. But on the output side, you technically have 16 ports, but they are paired up.
Okay.
You have 8 local HDMI ports right on the box and 8 HDBaseT Ethernet ports.
So it's not 16 independent images.
No. The Ethernet output actually mirrors the HDMI output of the same number. So output 1 HDMI and output 1 Ethernet always show the exact same content.
Which sounds restrictive until you really think about the installation workflow.
It does.
Because this lets you have a local monitor right there in the rack to verify the input.
For confidence monitoring.
Right. While the Ethernet port sends that exact same signal to the projector or the TV in the other room.
Precisely. You don't have to run to the other end of the building to see if the game is actually playing on screen.
That's a massive time saver. And since it uses HDBaseT, we aren't talking about running HDMI cables through the walls anymore.
No, we're using standard Cat5 or Cat6 Ethernet cables.
Now, just to be clear for anyone listening who might be new to HDBaseTs, we aren't plugging these into a network switch, right?
Correct. That is a critical distinction. Do not plug this into your internet router.
It'll just break the network.
Yeah, it uses the physical Ethernet cable, but the protocol is strictly point-to-point video transmission. It's designed to push bandwidth that would completely choke a standard network.
And the distance specs on this look really solid. I mean, 130 feet for full 4K at 60 Hz.
Or up to 230 feet if you drop down to 1080p.
Which pretty much covers the footprint of almost any large project you'd be working on.
Easily.
Now, looking at the installation side of things, I noticed PACE in the feature list.
Power over cable.
Right, because in the IT world, we all know PoE, power over Ethernet. This is the exact same concept.
It's very similar, but proprietary to these video extenders. Power over cable basically means the main Zenty matrix sends electricity down that Cat6 line to power the receiver box sitting behind the TV.
That is a huge labor saver.
Absolutely.
Because you don't need to hire an electrician to install a power outlet behind every single display just to power a tiny converter box.
It keeps the install incredibly clean.
Yeah.
And speaking of a clean setup, we should probably talk about audio handling, because in these environments, you rarely want the audio actually coming out of the TV speakers.
No, because if you're in a sports bar, the TV is flat on the wall, but you want the sound coming from the ceiling speakers above the tables.
Exactly. So the Zenty unit includes audio de-embedding.
Nice.
You get dedicated SPDIF digital and analog 3.5mm ports, meaning you can strip the audio straight from the HDMI signal and route it directly to a centralized amplifier.
Or a totally distinct sound system.
Right, while the video just happily continues onto the display.
So the bar patrons see the game on the wall, but hear the commentary through the dedicated house system.
Exactly.
And quality-wise, what are we looking at when it hits the screen?
It fully supports 4K at 60 Hz with 4.4.4 chroma sampling.
Which basically means no color compression.
Right. If you're displaying fine text from a PC, it will look completely crisp, not blurred out at the edges.
Now, control is the other big factor here.
Right.
Because at a list price around $4,600, nobody is walking up to this rack unit to press buttons on the front panel every time they want to change a channel.
I mean, you can, but it's really designed for automation.
Yeah.
It has a web GUI, so you can easily switch inputs from a browser on your phone.
Always handy.
But more importantly, it has RS-232 and IP control. It's meant to be the invisible brain sitting behind a Control 4 or Crestron system.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Ideally, this unit represents the ultimate bridge between messy consumer cabling and professional clean integration.
It really does. It takes all that chaos and centralizes it into one reliable hub.
But it does leave you with a lingering question.
Because we are seeing wireless casting and video over IP become incredibly robust lately.
Right, AirPlay and Chromecast are basically everywhere now. So the real question is, in 5 years, will physical copper-based switchers like this Zenty still be the gold standard for rock-solid reliability in commercial spaces,
Or will they just become obsolete artifacts of the cable age?
replaced entirely by software and Wi-Fi? It's definitely something to think about for your next big build.